Wow. Well, we are in a brand new series called Custom Home, and part of our custom experience as a church is we want to make our guests, especially those who are just kicking the tires, really feel welcome. So if you're new to a church experience, you come in and go, hey, I know what church music sounds like, and you walk in, you're like, well, that's different. Because part of what we do every week is we create a custom experience, and the conversations I have with folks who are still kicking the tires on faith, they're saying, hey, my wife drugged me here, I lost a bet with somebody, that's why I'm here. They say, that's exactly expresses, I don't want to get fooled again. I've seen inauthentic religious people, I've seen the televangels, I don't want to get fooled again in this process. And so today we chose this song for another reason. And one of the reasons we chose it is because years ago at CCD, we actually had a whole process where we had a thing called CSI Religion. Each week I interviewed a Buddhist, one week I interviewed a Muslim, I brought in religious leaders, and we had a dialogue together to investigate different claims of different religions. And in that time, one of our favorite songs that invited people into really thinking about how you not get fooled was that song. In fact, back in those days, a guy who was kicking the tires on faith, a guy named Brendan Hansford, was playing in the band. He used to play in the band with his bare feet because he could feel the beat of the drum behind it. And today he's with us, and I'd like to give a warm welcome to a international celebrity, Mr. Brendan Hansford. Let's bring him up.
How do I follow that? I don't know. So, custom home, that is just a great way to describe my journey over the last 15 years or so. In fact, 15 years ago, I was probably the last person you would expect to see up here. I started off with absolutely zero interest in God or church or anything like that. But looking back, I can see that God had a custom design just for me. So let me tell you my story. I grew up in West Texas. No. I was lucky enough to study at Oxford University in England and then started a career in investment banking in London and then New York, and then eventually we moved to Cincinnati where I joined the management team of a large local company. I had a lovely wife, 3 nice kids, and really life was pretty good. Now, I wasn't a stranger to church. Growing up, my family had made me go every weekend, and I hated it. Bored me to death. And as soon as I could, I quit. Once we got married, Christine, my wife, who can be rather persuasive, encouraged us to go every week for the family. And so I did most of the time, but it just wasn't my thing. Now, was I exploring God and faith? No way. Did I read the Bible? Are you kidding? But while I wouldn't have admitted this in public, to myself privately, I would have said, yeah, I'm a reasonably good guy. You know, I rushed home from business trips for my kids' events. I told the truth. I didn't cheat on my wife. I paid tax. I resisted every temptation to rob every bank I ever saw. So what happened? What made a difference for me? What was God's custom approach for me? I don't have time to tell you everything that happened, but here are 5 of the custom features of the home that God built for me. Number 1, my wife Christine. God set things in motion by sending this terribly nice Midwestern girl all the way from Marymount to England to fetch me. Now, those of you who know us would understand that's quite a stretch. American girl, English boy. I'm tall, she's not quite so tall. She's quite shy, I'm not so shy. I love soccer. She really does not like soccer. So I could go on. Somehow, God made this unlikely love story work. Now, looking back, I think he was just showing off. Anyway, custom feature number 2, we started coming to Horizon. Now, I got to tell you, I was pretty skeptical when Christine said, let's try out this new church. And when we first turned up, there were maybe 20 couples meeting in a drafty Indian Hill school auditorium. This was a disaster for me. I couldn't hide at the back, and I couldn't avoid all these church people. But, see what I mean? But happily, God was looking out for me because I walked in and saw the band had no bass player. Now, some people say that coincidences happen when God wants to stay anonymous. It turns out the band did have a bass player, but coincidentally, he was sick that weekend. Coincidentally, I like playing bass. So I volunteered. I was thinking, it's got to be better than listening to the sermon. So before I knew it, I was playing with the band every week, which meant that his custom feature number 4, I started spending a lot of time with Horizon people. To my surprise, they were actually quite nice. Some of them were normal. And I began to make some friendships. I met people from all walks of life, business execs, professionals, leaders, parents, people I could relate to in every respect except one. Unlike me, they seemed to take this God stuff seriously. Now, Christine was very anxious for me to take it seriously too. I think I mentioned she's very persuasive. But I just wasn't ready for it. Playing with the band was great. Praying with the band was just plain weird. And then things got worse. Custom design number 5. We got invited to a couples group. This is awful. The idea of spending a perfectly good evening with a bunch of people I barely knew talking about church stuff was not my idea of fun. My problem was how to get out of it politely. Aha, I thought, I'll tell them I'm so busy at work with my travel schedule, I can only meet on Friday nights. No one in their right minds, right, will sacrifice a Friday night for a Bible study. About 20 people sacrificed their Friday night for my Bible study. Now, why would they do that? Why? It's crazy. What I realize now is they were doing what the Bible says, love your neighbor. And I was their neighbor, and they were loving on me by rearranging their schedules to give me a chance, a custom design for me to meet them, to connect with them, and ultimately through them to connect with God. Now I have to admit, I began enjoying hanging around these people, and the more I hung around them, I realized more and more they had one thing in common. They all seemed to take the Bible seriously. And so quietly, without telling anybody, even my wife, I started reading it myself, just a little bit at a time. So what happened? You're probably thinking, right? Bolt of thunder, angels, choirs in the sky. Nothing happened. Nothing had happened at all. But I did learn a few things. 1, there really is a God. 2, I'm not him. 3, you can find the answer to almost any serious question you have about anything important in this book we call the Bible. And once I realized that, things began to click into place for me. So let me just quickly sum up with 4 things that changed for me that were just cool. 1, I made some real friends. Not just work colleagues or people whose kids were the same age as my kids. Real, deep, meaningful, lasting friendships. And let's face it, when we get to be adults, those friendships are hard to find. I have lots of friends. Everyone who's my friend, I've met through Horizon. Second thing, I think I've become a better parent to my kids and a better son to my parents and a better husband to my wife. And you could ask them, and they'd probably tell you I've got a way to go yet. But I have an idea, a model of what I'm shooting for, and I got it from the Bible. Third thing is, and this is kind of ironic, the guy who tried to avoid being in a Bible study now likes Bible studies. In fact, I lead Bible studies. Talk about irony. And then fourth thing, and this is maybe the most important thing, this Jesus, this God of the Bible, the architect of the custom home for me, this Jesus is real to me. So there you have it. God sent a shy Midwestern girl to England to get the investment banker who didn't believe in God to go to Cincinnati, where a church band bass player would be sick mysteriously one morning, so the guy who didn't want to go to church would end up involved in a church band and get in a Bible study he didn't want to go to, and here he is on stage talking to a church full of people about how church isn't really so bad after all. Now, you might call it a coincidence, but I call it a custom design. Thank you.
Part of our custom design of this service today is I know Brendan is also a huge Beatles fan. So we decided to bring him out of retirement, kick off the shoes. For those of you who weren't with us during those years at CCD, there's no song that expresses that custom design, that spiritual journey we're on better than the Beatles song, Long and Winding Road. So you heard a little bit about Brendan's custom journey. I've been friends with Brendan for the last 13 years. It's been neat to see what God's done there. And I want to talk about how Jesus has this unique approach, that he always has a custom design with the people he interacts with. It's personal, it's caring, it's loving, and it's powerful. And today I specifically want to talk about how Jesus addressed the blunt. Now, I got to tell you, as a person who wordsmiths an awful lot, and words are very important, and as a people pleaser, as somebody who doesn't want to offend, words are important to me. And yet God has surrounded me with people who are more blunt than I am. And I have a tendency, ironically, to judge the judgers. So those who are blunt, I have a tendency to go, man, you shouldn't have said it that way. Oh, that was a little harsh. So those who are high J's on the Myers-Briggs, instead of embracing the differences, I have a tendency to judge those differences. And it's ironic because I'm judging the people who are judging, which shows how broken I am. But over the years, and seeing Jesus' interaction, Jesus really affirms the doubter. He affirms the blunt, somebody who cuts to the chase. And I've certainly learned to appreciate that over the years, as some of my favorite people are blunt. My wife is certainly blunt. My son is certainly blunt. My father is certainly blunt. And boy, it saves so much time in my marriage. I've been married 22 years, and we haven't had to play games. I always know where I stand. But you know, there's a benefit to that, of not having to just sort of, what are you really saying here? And God's going to interact with a guy who's very blunt. His name's Nathaniel today. And he creates an absolute customized journey to help this guy begin to kick the tires on his questions, his doubts. This person's very, very aware of the literature of his day. He's highly educated of his day. He is very much tied into the American Idol of his day, a songbook called the Book of Psalms that he would have been read, his favorite songs, his favorite poetry. And yet the guy's very, very blunt, and Jesus will address that. And I have learned that the way Jesus customizes his approach to each person is something I've been able to apply in my life. In the sense that the way I parent my daughter is very different from the way I parented my son. It was customized. Where my daughter's heart is very tender, I could just look at her when she was young without like, what's going on? And she'd burst into tears. Versus my son, I'd be like, let me ask you the exact right question. So, were you up at the computer beyond 11:30? And I got prepositional phrase after prepositional phrase. Yes! With my daughter, I found that affirmation and love and what my wife and son would call flowery words is important to her. It's important to me. With my son, I found that the best way to interact with him is less is more. Dad, what's your point? With my wife, I found that if I say to her, hey, it's 10:29 right now, I just need you to listen for 5 minutes. I promise I'll be done by 10:35. She's able to listen better. Good, it's not going to go on for an hour. So I've learned to customize in my marriage and with my kids in a way that puts their needs ahead of my own as I'm learning to connect. And the same's true with your colleagues or employees, isn't it? Each person, to get the best out of them, you customize. Somebody might be high challenge. You give them projects that really challenge them. Somebody else, you might, every time you get together, talk about how important they are to the team. Because you know that's a real key aspect. And so you customize your leadership because you love and care for them to bring the best out of them. That's exactly what Jesus did. And the principle we're going to look at today is exactly that. Think custom home, not spec house, when it comes to your own personal growth, your parenting, your marriaging, your interacting with people. Because Jesus' approach to people and family is the key to every relationship in your life. Your relationship with your kids, your spouse, your friends, people who are convinced of what you're convinced of or unconvinced of what you're convinced of. Friendship is the key. And Jesus is all about developing friendship with people no matter what they believe, no matter what walk of life. So we're going to look at those two aspects. What does it mean to think custom home? And what does it mean to not think spec house? Custom home. Jesus has this very customized approach. And what he would do is he would always meet people where they are. That's what custom home is. You meet people where they are. You treat people like a guest. And with treating people like a guest, you don't force them to go faster than they want. You don't force them to talk about things they don't want to talk about. You meet people where they are. You're a friend. And Jesus did that. The following day, Jesus wanted to go to Galilee. And he found Philip and said to him, hey, why don't you follow me? And Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. So Jesus meets this guy named Andrew, or Philip rather, and says, hey, won't follow me? Let's head to your hometown. You don't need to come to the synagogue to talk about this. You don't need to go to some religious activity. Hey, let's just hang out together. Let's be friends together. You might have questions about me. You might have questions. By this time, Jesus has been pretty well known and heard about in the community. Let's just hang out. Let's be friends. Do you mind if we hang out? Show me your hometown. Show me where you live, where you work. So they head to Bethsaida, and they get to Bethsaida, and sure enough, when they get there, this is a business community right on the Sea of Galilee. In fact, they've uncovered some archaeology there. I got a chance to visit a couple of years ago, and it's very much a business community. This is a fisherman's house that they've located here. So there's a huge fishing industry. They had live fish tanks that had been found in the area there in the archaeology. This was a business owner. And a business owner that not only worked in business, but had a successful enough business that they owned their own boat, which was a major commodity, shows a level of affluence in those days. And not only that, but they also had their own hired men. Because when two of the brothers decide to follow Jesus, there will actually be, well, we'll just have our employees do it. So this is a rather affluent family here in Bethsaida. In fact, if you lived during that day, it would have looked something like this. This is a picture of, on one side is the fisherman's house. You'll see the area they could have, on the right-hand side, hang their nets at the end of a day, at the end of a long business day. Right across the street is the winemaker's house. They found lots of remnants of a business there who was making wine, producing a wine for the community and for themselves. So this was a business community, highly literate. And in those days, what you'd be literate in would be the literature of Judaism. So this was a Jewish community. We're highly read in the Old Testament, highly read in the songs of the day, the songs they would sing. The top 40 would have been the book of Psalms, and a group that was highly looking forward to the coming Messiah. And so they knew the list of specifications of what they were looking for. So Jesus walks into this town and has a very customized approach. And if you look at Jesus interact, if you've never read the Bible, he interacts with everybody differently. He shows up to a woman they're about to stone, and he actually turns to all the people who are about to stone her and basically writes in the sand all the things they've done wrong and says, he who has no sin, cast the first stone. And she's so relieved, she puts her arm around her and says, just go and change your ways. He's talking to a Roman centurion, and the Roman centurion, very, very skeptical about this Jesus and this religion. And he says, as I've been dialoguing with you, it seems like the thing that's really holding you back is a lack of contentment in your life. And she says, I really would encourage you to be content with your wages. That's all he says. Jesus interacts with Mary and Martha. They both just lost their brother and they're grieving, but they grieve very differently. As we'll see in a few weeks, Jesus interacts with Mary and her grief very different from how he interacts with Martha. Then Jesus gets face to face with an egomaniac religious guy, and he's very hard on him. Your religion is just a masquerade for some inner secrets that you're just pretending don't exist. He's going to talk with three out of the top 3 wealthiest men in Jerusalem. He's going to affirm their wealth. He's going to affirm their journey. He's going to create some guarded private places where they can have some spiritual conversations. He's just a master at customizing the home for each person's journey. I had a friend of mine who was a custom home builder in Atlanta, and I thought I knew what a custom home was. So I was talking to him one day. I said, well, I know custom home is you can pick, either this plan, or that plan. And then you can have these 6 colors of paint, you can choose one of the 6. And he's like, no, that's a spec house that's pretending to be a custom home. He says, let me tell you what I do. I spend hours with my clients, and we choose where every register goes. We have thousands of variations. Every single doorknob, every single hinge, every single faucet. I work with the family and the architect. And what are your needs? What are your wants? What are you going to do here? What are your dreams for your family? How do we create a home that can facilitate your hopes and dreams? It's a long process. It's a wonderful process of finding the needs of the people and customizing everything about the experience for them. So at the end of the day, I've not only built them a home, but I've created friends. Because all those hours of conversation, I've gotten to know them, their hopes and their dreams. That's what friendship's about. And that's what Jesus does here with these new friends that he's met. Look what happens as it continues. He walked along the Sea of Galilee. He meets them where they are. He saw Simon and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea. And they were fishermen. So Jesus said to them, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. So of all the metaphors he could have used, come, let's change the world. Come, let's heal the brokenhearted if they were doctors. He purposely customizes his approach to say, hey, I know you're about fishing. How about we come fish for men? How about we come impact and change the world? And it says they immediately left their nets and followed him, which, again, if you're a skeptic, and back to that Who song, won't get fooled again, you're like, there's no way a successful business person is going to hear Jesus show up and go, oh, sure, yeah, I'll follow you and give up the next 3 years of my life. But if you go right across the Sea of Galilee, you're going to find that one of the largest libraries of the day that held the most amount of scrolls of its day was right across the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus was trained. This was the Harvard of its day. This was the educational. This is where the rabbis were trained, the philosophers of the day were trained. Jesus was a household name. And it would be like a person who was one of the most educated in your industry. Imagine in your industry, the person you look up to the most, who's got a track record of just incredible success, walks in and says, hey, I'd like to apprentice you. You'd be like, oh my goodness, I want to be apprenticed by one of the most educated philosophers, teachers of our day. Hey, we're going to put the business on hold. Let's have the hired men run it for a while. I'm getting invited into a sought-after apprenticeship. And so that's what Jesus does. He invites them in, and they followed him. Nathaniel, Philip, who's following him, checking Jesus out, I wonder how he's going to handle this. That's interesting. I wonder what he's going to say to that. Well, that's interesting. Philip is so engaged with Jesus that he decides to go find a friend of his and say, you ought to check this out. This guy I'm getting to know, you ought to check this out. So Philip finds Nathaniel and says to him, I found the one in whom Moses, in the law, of whom was written about in Moses in the law, this would be the literature they've been reading at the time, wrote about. Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And here's where we get Nathaniel the Blunt. Who again, he is read, he's educated, highly educated in the scrolls of his day. He's like, listen, I know what the Messiah is supposed to come from. This guy's from Nazareth. And here's the blunt. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Now, this is often not a great way to start a conversation when you meet somebody. Hey, I'm Chad Hovind. I'm from Cincinnati. Cincinnati? The armpit of Ohio? You know, you're like, wait, I didn't know we were the armpit of Ohio. What are you talking about? I mean, this is just a very offensive. But this was a guy who just really spoke his mind. Hey, listen, I know the Messiah is supposed to come from Bethlehem. That's what Micah says. He's supposed to, he sort of listed out the list. He's supposed to be of a virgin, da-da-da. He's not supposed to come from Nazareth. In fact, have you been to Nazareth? Can anything good come out of that place? Now, this is the person who's on a journey, and they're saying, I don't believe the Bible. I don't want to offend you Christians, but I just think it's ridiculous. I don't believe Jesus did miracles. People don't walk on water. I don't believe in the big spaghetti monster in the sky either. And you're wondering how people are going to interact. I had a good friend of mine and my next-door neighbor who would always sort of push me with these little comments. And I didn't get mad. I'm like, well, I've read that stuff too, and that's a great thing to think about. Really. How we respond to the blunt, to the questions, to the doubts speaks a lot about us. Are we offended? Are our beliefs so fragile that, oh, don't break my beliefs? And I love how Jesus interacts with him. It's very customized. It's very specific. And look what he says. Philip doesn't react. Philip doesn't get all mad that he's dissed Jesus' hometown. He just says this, come and see. Just come see. You don't have to believe it. Just come hang out. I've made a great group of friends. We are loving it. These are a group of fishermen. They're hanging out. This is guy talk all the time. Listen, even if you don't like the guy, just come see. Come check it out. And that's what our church is really about. If you were to sum up Horizon in one word, it's friendship. How do we develop friends who believe whatever they want to believe? But we want to develop friendship. Friendship with God and friendship with other people. And often the pathway that any of us take to higher purpose or meaning or discovering who God is, or in Brennan's case, the Bible and Jesus, it's a pathway. And usually that pathway happens one step at a time. You think all Christians are idiots, and then you discover one who's not. You still assume most of them are, but you go, I like that guy. All Christians seem hypocritical. They seem inauthentic. But boy, my neighbor, my friend, there's something real there. And you take a step. And maybe the next step is you're talking to somebody and you realize, oh my goodness, I thought the Bible was totally irrelevant to everything. That person said that they were in a business meeting and somebody shared one side of an argument. And they said, before I make a decision, I want to ask somebody what their opinion was on the other side of the argument. And they just happen to mention that there's a proverb from the Bible that says, one side of an argument looks good until the other side comes to question it. So I use that when I'm in business dealings, so that principle makes sure I get all the facts. Of course, that makes sense. It's common sense. And you know what? I never thought the Bible could be relevant. I still don't believe it. But it's interesting that helped you be a better dad or helped you in your business dealings. And then maybe you take another step. you start saying, I'm starting to see the Bible could be helpful, even though I still think it's probably full of fables. And hopefully I'm not a literalist. Those people take the Bible literally. I've never read it. I don't know what's in it. But whatever it is, let's not take it literally, But what happens often in all of us is we take our journey toward higher purpose or peace. It's almost always it was a relationship that helped me here. It was a circumstance where I went through cancer and I was either going to turn away from God or find that I needed God, and something happened there. It was this circumstance that happened in my life. And so as a church, what we do is we try and, wherever we are in our journey, we try and go back and invest and build friendships with people at different places in their journey, help you in your moments, and we try and find ways to help you explore your questions. So we create what we call exploring environments. And for some of us, like Brendan, who was looking for just, didn't even know he was looking for friends, but like a chance to connect. And then a chance to be equipped. How can I be a better dad? How can I be a better parent? And so we're not here to convince anybody of anything. We're just creating environments where you can come and hang out and be a friend. And some of you might say, I don't want to explore any questions. I'd like to connect. Some of you say, hey, I've got plenty of connecting. Who's going to answer the question about the problem of evil? Have you guys even thought about that? Well, we have. Let me tell you what we've come to. So this is the journey we're on as a church, and it's a customized journey. Everyone's journey is different. Everyone's connection is different. I had a friend who's been attending our church for 7 or 8 years, and he invited his friend for the first time to come to our service. And so he checked out our environment. He came to our equipping service where we do praise and worship and verse-by-verse Bible teaching. He came to the service where we do communion, and he's like, my friend would hate that. Oh. But my friend would love the 10 and 11:10 service. And they say, what's the topic this week? I would tell him the topic. Oh, he'll love that. I'll invite him to that one. What's the topic next week? I tell him the topic. That's a stupid topic. I came up with that topic. But that is not the right topic for my friend. Well, great. Don't invite your friend. And you're able to create a customized journey. Hey, I want to go to a group. And let me tell you about the group we go to. At this group, we just hang out. We didn't even talk about spiritual stuff. We just literally hang out and have like a social hour. It's just dessert. Awesome. That's what we're looking for. Talking about spiritual things at somebody's house, that just seems weird, as Brendan communicated. So that's what we're trying to do. And if you grew up in church, it's so hard to think about the first-time user experience. So imagine that you've moved to England. And I've customized this message for Brendan, so I threw in an England reference here for you. You moved to England. Your business has moved you there. And as you arrive, you've picked up in a flat. A flat, that's me trying to be English again. And you're in this flat, and you've got a next-door neighbor. And the next-door neighbor just seems genuine. They invite you and your wife over. You have dinner together, and you're really developing a friendship. Now, at the same time, you're skeptical. You're wondering, what's their angle? Is this like a multi-marketing scheme? Am I going to find out after the third dinner they're going to hit me up with some, pyramid scheme I'll be part of? So you're skeptical, and rightfully so. But it seems genuine. And then you come out one day, and you've been very busy with work, and this person mowed your lawn for you. I don't know if flats have lawns to mow, but let's assume it does. So they mow your lawn, and you're either offended by that, what are you doing, invading my privacy, or you're like, oh my goodness. And he says, hey, I was mowing my own lawn, I thought I'd mow yours too. Well, this person seems to genuinely care about me. Well, you're friends for about a year, and you happen to say, hey, what are you doing on Friday night? Oh, on Friday nights I go to the Goodfellas Club. The Goodfellas Club? What's that? Oh, it's just this thing I've been doing for years. And at the Goodfellas Club, I just hang out with a bunch of friends, and we talk about just what we believe and things like that. You've never heard of the Goodfellas Club. So, but you're interested. So a few weeks go by, and you say, hey, what is that Goodfellas Club you go to every Friday night? Well, do you ever want to come along? I don't know. Is it a cult? I don't even know what a cult is, but I don't want to go to a cult. Right? It's just a word I have. So you say, well, I'll try it this Friday night. Do you think, as my friend, I would like it? Yeah, I think you would like it. So what are the questions you immediately have before you go, which is a real thing, by the way, the Goodfellas Club. Before you go to the Goodfellas Club, what are your concerns? What is it? What do they believe? Is this a cult? Whatever that means, I don't know. Am I going to be singled out? Are they going to make me feel weird? Am I going to have a big visitor sticker that everybody looks at me? Am I going to come in and people are going to say, well, welcome our visitor? You would want somebody, and are you going to sing songs you've never sung? Are you going to come in and they're singing like the great Pink Panther song, we love the Pink Panther in the sky? And you're like, I don't know who the Pink Panther in the sky is, and why are we singing to him? Am I going to walk in the door and they've got hang nooses on the walls? Why would they have hang nooses on the wall? That's weird. And there's dummies in the hang nooses around the wall. That's very strange. Right? All that would be weird. And that's how most people feel who've been at church for a while. Why do you have a cross? That's like an instrument of torture. It's like a hang noose on the wall. That's weird. What songs are you singing? I don't even know if I believe this yet. You want somebody who treats you like a guest. Now, this isn't like sales technique. Hey, let me pretend I like what you like so I can sell you. This is like inviting somebody to your home. You invite somebody to your home, and what do? Hey, do you guys have any allergies? Yeah, I'm allergic to shellfish. I want to have snow crab. I love snow crab. So what do? You don't eat your favorite dish because you want to put your friend's needs ahead of your own. That's what this custom approach is about. You customize. Hey, the cross, Jesus died on the cross. It's important to me. But if you're new to this whole thing, it looks like you walked into a room with like electric chairs around the wall. That's strange. Why do you have hang nooses around your wall? That's strange. So it's not that you're embarrassed of what you do, but you customize the experience to where the person is. And that's what Jesus does here. Come and see. Let's check it out. That's why as a church we try and create environments that are relevant and authentic and creative and excellent. But really our motto is, since the days we began, Horizon is yours to explore. We're just trying to comfortably connect people to God through the Bible, which we've come to some conclusions about, and a community of friends. That's what the church is about. And there's no pressure. You can believe whatever you want at the church. And you can ask us why we've come to our conclusions, and I hope we've thought through it. But you don't have to believe what we believe. But we also, that's what friends do, right? You share what you love. If you love soccer, you talk about soccer. If you like sci-fi and Star Wars, you're going to talk about Star Wars. If you like jet skiing or you like fly fishing, friends share with each other what they care about and what they like. So that's this custom home approach. And Jesus says something very interesting. So he meets Nathaniel. And as he does, he doesn't say, I can't believe you said nothing good comes out of Nazareth. What's wrong with you? No, look what Jesus says to him. Jesus says, saw Nathaniel coming toward him, who's just dissed his hometown, and he says to him, man, behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit. He affirms, I love the fact that you're so committed to being honest, that you don't beat around the bush, you don't sort of, well, you could sort of sway the truth here or make it feel a little more flowery here. You said it. Nazareth, that's the wrong place. Nazareth, I don't think anything's good ever come out of that. I like a guy who speaks his mind. I like a guy who shares his doubts. I like a guy who says where he is. But look at Nathaniel's response. Nathaniel says, wow, how did you know me? Which again, if you're new to the Bible, you're like, that just cannot be. Nobody gets affirmed, hey, thanks for being blunt, and says, how did you know me? That just doesn't seem very realistic that really happened. Unless Jesus so knows him that he's quoting from one of his favorite top 40 songs. This phrase, in whom there's no deceit, is a lyric from a song of the day. Probably Nathaniel's favorite song. Oh man, I love that song. I love listening to that song. You know my favorite line in that song is that God loves the person in whom there's no deceit. I love the idea that God would affirm somebody who's committed to the truth and speaking the truth and being blunt. That's the kind of man I want to be. Look where it gets quoted from. In the book of Psalms, verse 32, the songbook of the day, it says, blessed is the man to whom the Lord does not impute iniquity and in whose spirit there is no deceit. It's a lyric from his favorite song. Probably more than just his favorite song. It's probably the very thing he saw himself as. Some of you might say, hey, I'm Irish. Some of you might say, hey, I'm an Apple guy. I'm a Windows guy. But there's something you affirm to be, a truth teller. He said, I'm the kind of guy who wants to be known for not having deceit. And God looks at him, and Jesus looks at him and says, man, I like that about you. The thing you're affirming and trying to be, I see that in you. In the modern equivalent, it would be like quoting a movie. I come up to you and say, you know what? You are General Maximus. I see your strength. Oh, General Maximus. Or you're a raging bull, though your tenacity. I've seen you at work. You go at it and you don't stop. You got such resilience. And you just feel like, wow, that is me. Or in my case, Chad, you're Ferris Bueller. Oh, that's great. I remember a guy we were looking at hiring years ago. It was in my office, and we were talking about the whole process of hiring. And he said, Chad, as we continue this dialogue, can I just share something personally with you? And I said, no. I said, yeah, sure. And he said, I don't know if I can keep up with you. You just are go, 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 go. And I like to go slow in relationships. And I know you like friendship, but I'm just not sure I can keep up with you. He said, but I tell you one thing I have learned about you getting to know you. He sort of like, very genuine, but just looked me in the eye in a way that was fatherly. He was about 15 years older than me. He said, Chad, having gotten to know you for the last couple of days, I realize that you are not driven by ego. So I am sometimes, but that's not your motivation. It's not fame. It's not money. I've noticed that the thing that really motivates you or drives you is you want to be responsible with everything God's given to you. You are motivated by a deep sense of responsibility. And then I really appreciate that about you. And I'm suddenly like, in this, I'm trying to hire you sales type meeting, I'm about to cry. I'm like, I'm about to cry. What's wrong with you? He was able to speak into me something he saw in me, and I went, wow, he gets me. He knows me. And I think that's what's going on here with Nathaniel. Jesus has quoted his favorite lyric from his favorite song to a characteristic that he has aspired to and say, a man in whom there's no deceit. Very, very customized. And notice what Jesus says next. Jesus says, hey, so if that's a natural means of quoting his favorite lyric, there's a supernatural aspect of saying, hey, before Philip called you, I saw you under the fig tree. You might say, I don't know if I believe in God and miracles. Well, listen, if the Bible's true, and if Jesus was God, and if God was on earth, he ought to be doing some miraculous stuff. And wouldn't it be a bigger philosophical problem if the Bible says, God's on earth, and he doesn't do anything? So it is actually rational to believe that if the Bible's claims are true, that God should be doing something that's supernatural, the very basis of what God is. But he says, I saw you under the fig tree. And notice how many times it's so personal. I called you when you were under the fig tree. I saw you. There's this very personal approach to the journey. And that's why I said think custom home, not spec house. And what do I mean by not spec house? Sometimes we try and apply the exact same parenting style to both kids, the exact same sort of, here's what we do at church. It's the one program. It's the one thing. Instead of really recognizing how unique and different we all are. And Jesus does that as well. It's not a spec house, it's approach. See, when you don't use a spec out approach, you take a personal approach that helps people take their next step. And you might say, you really need to wrestle with the problem of evil. And they're saying, I don't care about the problem of evil. Well, I think you should know about it. Like, I'd like to meet some friends. Oh, you don't have a one-size-fit-all. You customize the approach to where your friends are. Hey, you interested in going fly fishing? I've never been fly fishing. Well, then let's not go to Montana for 5. That's probably not where fly fishing is. Down in LaGrange, Georgia, we used to fly fish at a place. You wouldn't take somebody for a week if they've never gone fly fishing before. You'd start with, well, let's try it for a day in case you hate it. It's not a spec home. And look, Nathaniel is so impacted by what Jesus said in recognizing his favorite song, his favorite lyric, who he really was. He says, Rabbi, you. Jesus saw him personally, you. His response is you. You are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus answered and said to him, really? Just because I knew your favorite lyric and just because I quoted your favorite thing, just because I was able to affirm you in a way you haven't heard before, you think that's going to bring you? Man, there's even better things to come. You're going to see greater things than this. Something happens, not when you're being sold, but when you experience genuine friendship. You go, wow, somebody genuinely cared about me to think about what I wanted, what I needed, the music I like, the food I like, when I came to their home. About 2 years ago, I think it was the CEO of Ritz-Carlton was discussing their philosophy of ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And every employee at Ritz-Carlton, every employee, housekeeping, managers, everybody in between, cooks, they are all given authority to spend up to $2,000 to make a guest experience great. $2,000 per year, $2,000 per incident without even referencing their manager. Now that's a lot of trust. That's a lot of training. That's a lot of commitment to the user experience. That's a lot of not just treating people like we want their business back. We want to care about you in a way you feel like we're family. One day, one of the housekeepers was walking by one of the hotel rooms, and one of their principles is if you hear a problem, you own it. And she heard a man who was in a wheelchair say, honey, I know, I wish I could take you out to the beach, but the wheelchair just won't move through the sand. And for our anniversary, I'm really disappointed that I can't go out to the beach with you because I know you love it. This housekeeper immediately, philosophy, if you hear about a problem, you own it, heard it, immediately said, I want to help fulfill the dreams of these friends that are with us. She hired, that day, she went and hired a carpenter. The carpenter built a boardwalk out from the front of the back of the hotel, a boardwalk all the way out to the sand. Got it done for less than $2,000. Didn't even tell the manager. She then came to the room the next day and said, hey, I heard you talking about the dream you had, that on this experience you wanted to be able to take your wife out to the beach. I want you to know we made a way for that to happen. What? Follow me. follow me. He and his wife came out. They got to this newly built boardwalk out to the beach. Sure enough, pushed him all the way out, and he got to spend time on his anniversary with his wife on the beach with his wheelchair. Are they trying to get another customer? Yeah, but that's pretty extreme. That's treating people like friends. And you better believe you're a customer for life, because you say they really care and went above and above and above and above the call of duty. That's what God wants to do for you and I. That's what we try and do as a church. How can we customize and really care about you and you care about us and really develop that kind of friendship? And Jesus responds to that in a very interesting way. Another thing that grabs Nathaniel's attention. Jesus says, hey, you think you've seen good things? There's greater things to come. In fact, it's going to be shocking what we're going to do. He says, most assuredly I say to you, hereafter you will see heaven opened and the angel of God ascending and descending from the Son of God, man. To which, again, if you're not so the Bible's not your thing, you're like, what does that mean? But if you were a Jewish guy who was a master in Old Testament literature, Jesus picked this particular customized reference to the book of Genesis for a reason. What reason? Well, in the story from the Old Testament in Genesis, Jacob is about to meet his brother. They've been estranged for 14 years. And he's scared to death because he cheated his brother out of a lot of stuff, and his brother's a mighty warrior, and he's pretty much heading into danger, and it feels like his brother's going to kill him. On his way, God stops him and says, I want you to know you're facing your greatest fear. You're trying to reconcile some relationships. I am with you. And he gives him a vision, a dream, maybe is a better way to say it. And in the dream, there's a ladder going up to heaven. If you grew up in Sunday school, we are climbing Jacob's ladder. If you don't worry about that. Angels are going up and down this ladder. Why does Jesus quote that? And I think we see Jesus' sense of humor, his personality. I think it's a wink, wink, elbow, elbow. What's the wink, wink, elbow, elbow? Well, if you read a little bit further, Jacob awakens from the dream, and he says, wow, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it when I saw the gate of heaven. So it's like quoting a movie. The minute I quote a movie, you can immediately, if I say, I'm not dead yet, you're immediately picturing the scene of Monty Python. In the same way, him quoting this reference from Old Testament, he would not only know that particular passage, but the pieces around it and go, let's see, there's angels up and down. Oh yeah, Jacob wakes up and says, the Lord was here. God was here, and I didn't even know it. I think it's Jesus' way of saying, God is here, and you may not even realize it. I'm not just a prophet. I'm not just a leader. I'm not just a teacher. God is here. And that begins just a little bit of a hint, a little breadcrumbs he begins to leave in Nathaniel's journey to begin to explore whether or not Jesus is who he says he is. So how do we respond to this? Well, I think for all of us, to apply Jesus' strategy, or Jesus' approach is maybe a better word, I think we need to think steps, not programs. How do we think steps, not programs? For our kids, we want to grow our kids. We want to develop our kids. We want to build better relationships with our kids. How do we think steps? What's the next step for me to engage? What's the next step for me to grow? Every season, every semester, I rearrange my schedule based on how I'm trying to customize my approach. We've had, about the last 6 years with my teenagers, we've had a family movie night. And so we moved it from Tuesday night to Thursday night based on college calendars and schedules. And so we've had a family movie night now for about 5 years. But every semester I have to recustomize it because I want to have that engagement weekly. Every winter I rearrange my schedule so that I take my teenagers and now Quinn, my 7-year-old, skiing for the last 4 years for him, 10 years for my 2 teenagers. So it's during that season I say, I want to engage. What's the next step to engage? Because I know if I can do a 45-minute drive out where I say, put your phones down on the way out, you can ignore me on the way back. We engage in conversations. I have the up and down on the slopes, and people are like, oh, you've been out west, haven't you? How can you enjoy Perfect North? Well, because I'm using it as a tool to build friendships with my kids, find out what's going on, where their disappointments are. In your marriage, think steps, not, wow, our marriage is in trouble. It may be. Our marriage is good. How do you get to great? What's the next step? For my wife and I, we realized with all the stress we've been under with just sort of the phase we've been in with my son Quinn, what a joy he is, but also some of the challenges, we realized, well, the next step is we need to go back to counseling because we just haven't been under this kind of pressure before. The next step is let's have somebody help speak into our life. They go, how do you handle this? And how do you handle stress? And how do I handle stress? And how's it helping each other? How's that not helping each other? But what would it be like for you to customize that and customize your spiritual journey? For you, a mission trip might be the best next step. Others of you are like, I didn't want to go on a mission trip. Some of you might be serving. You've been greeted by the door by somebody who cared about you. And for you to say, you know what, I'd like to create the same welcoming environment for others that was done for me. For others, you're like, I don't want to do any of that, and I'm not ready to jump into a Bible study, but I might start reading the Bible. So part of this series, what we did is we created, I'll grab it down here, we created a little tool called the Custom Home. And it's going to be a companion to the series we're going on. So in the first chapter, we're looking at Nathaniel. It's going to be a supplement to what I talked about today. And you might say, I'm not ready for a group, but I would like to dig into this more. So there's a chance to read through a couple verses from the Bible. Then there's a chance to ask some questions. You can do this as a group, with some groups that are starting. Or you can say, I'm not ready for a group. I'd like to do this as my own journey. First time I've ever tried digging into the Bible, and we made this hopefully very easy for you. Next steps, drill downs. And so each week, you can grab one of these. You only need it once for the whole series. Each week, you can use this as a pathway for you to just begin to maybe put your toe in the water when it comes to faith of the Bible. We hope, whatever you believe, whatever your friends are, that everyone could be welcome here at the church. And just know that we're deeply committed to building the kind of friendships that would help you in your path. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for your friendship, the offer of friendship for us. And we just ask in our journey, in our hopes, that you would help us take the next step, that there'd be no pressure, there'd be no guilt, whether our next step is serving or giving or growing or reading, that you would draw us toward our next step, toward finding higher purpose, higher meaning, and wrestling with who you are. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thank you for being here today. We would love to put a name with a face. Third door on your left, we'd love to say hi. If you have any questions, or if you came prepared to give, there's some offering boxes on the way out. Thanks again.